today we are going to be focusing on 10 ways to help you feel less confused, less stuck, less lost about your career next steps. It's a totally normal, natural feeling to have. Everyone has it at one point in time, even if they look like they know what they're doing and where they're going and everything is sorted. Everyone has doubts because some of the decisions that you make as part of your career, they're hard decisions. They have a sort of a long impact in terms of where they take you next and what that means. So there's lots of ways that we can sort of think about overcoming some of those feelings, or at least acknowledging some of those feelings that are part of this process. So as part of this presentation, it's good to introduce myself. I am Dr. Joseph Barber. I'm the Director of Graduate Career Initiatives here at Penn's Career Services. And I'm actually going to use a little bit of my background to illustrate some of the concepts that I'm going to be talking about today. So I have a PhD in animal behavior from the University of Oxford. I studied chickens, and I'm doing this now. So obviously, the direction that I took, or the paths that I took are not straight paths, because chickens and career advising are very distinct. But there's been an intentionality behind some of it, and some reasons why I got to where I am today. And some of it was, because of the environment that was happening around me and choices that I made as part of that. And I think that's all part of this process. So hopefully my background will help illustrate some of the concepts that I'll be talking about moving forward. But the reality is, oftentimes, I think we all at some point in time feel like the decisions ahead of us, the paths ahead of us are confusing, and they're not straight, and they're not always within our control. And I think it's doubly confusing, sort of where you have the sense where you're not quite sure what you're doing or where you are right now, but you're not even quite sure where you're heading, right? So it's not as if a maze is taking you to a destination, because you don't actually know what that destination is. In terms of careers, you just haven't done many of the jobs that you might be interested in or that might be available to you. And so, it's hard to sort of know what destination you're aiming towards, even if you can navigate in a straight line towards it. Again, totally understandable and totally natural as a concept. And sometimes it's because the way that jobs and careers are talked about, it puts a lot of pressure on us, right? So I think this idea that there's the right job or the right choice, and then everything else is wrong, sometimes that's what it feels like. But it's not. You can choose any path that's out there, and so long as your personal wellness and your safety is not compromised, you can make the best deal out of a job, no matter what it is, and take something away from it, take skills away and experiences away that can be really helpful moving forward. So it's really not a right choice or a wrong choice. They're just different choices that you can make at different points in time for different reasons. And I think so long as you acknowledge why you make a choice, it's very easy to sort of be much more comfortable about that choice. If you are a PhD student or a postdoc, I think sometimes the choice is presented as this, right? So there's faculty jobs and there's everything else, and the everything else is sort of one path, which is obviously not true, right? All of these things are paths. The academic faculty path is a path, the science writing path is a path, the working in nonprofits is a path. They're all equally valuable and all have benefits associated with them, all have elements that are not perfect about them. And so knowing that is also part of this process of feeling comfortable making these choices. So this isn't the reality, right? It's not a dichotomous choice between X and Y or right and wrong. It looks a little bit more like this. And I feel like even this feels overwhelming, right? But it's true, is that every path that you take can take you to another destination. You may not know what that destination is necessarily until you get on that path. Now you can sort of take a bird's eye view like this, and you can see all these paths going different ways. But the idea is that there are no straight line career paths. There are no, from point A to point B. Life doesn't work that way. There's always going to be sort of diversions along the way and different turns that you can take. So we're going to explore some of that as part of this narrative. This is a diagram that I often show because it sort of, I think, illustrates that the career exploration process itself is not straight. There's lots of twists and turns and rethinking and iterating, right? You don't have to go look through this. You don't have to worry about the writing. And this isn't meant to make you feel even more confused by it. These are just very easy steps to take. But as I said, the process of career exploration can feel overwhelming because there are multiple steps and multiple ways of exploring this. Overall, these are going to be the 10 steps that we're going to talk through. And I sort of posed some of them as questions to answer, right? And each of them provides, I think, some element of what's helpful and what is important to do at different points in this process, right? To be able to be reflective and sort of look back, and then also to look forward, is going to help give you some context to the decisions that you need to make and that you can make. And the more agency that you have, the more control that you feel like you have over the decisions, and the more information that you have about some career destinations out there, the less lost confused and stuck that you will feel, right? So that's why I sort of pose some of these questions, because if you are having the sort of sense of feeling, I don't know where I'm going, again, which is a perfectly natural, normal feeling to have that everyone does have, then these approaches can sometimes be a great way of making you feel more energized and confident about what's happening next. So then why graduate school? And this is an important one because you are here now, right? Many of you are graduate students or postdocs, so you've made a decision that brings you here. And the sort of the question about why might give you some sense as to, what your motivations were, what your passions were, that can help you sort of be more clear about what happens next, right? So I always think it's worth taking a little bit of time looking backwards just to make sure that you are comfortable, thinking about the history behind it and the motivations behind it, right? So what were the goals? What did you actually want to achieve? Because sometimes that's still going to be the goal moving forward. What you came in to get is what you want at the end. Sometimes what you came in to get and what you want at the end are very different, right? You've learned something about yourself or about the field or about something that you've done that changes your mind. And that is completely normal too. But it's helpful, again, to know the history of how you got there. And then thinking about it from a personal perspective, how did you want to change, right? What are the steps that you still need to take to go through this sort of transformation, as it were, your graduate transformation to become the thing that you wanted to do? Because that may give you a sense of what you can be doing next in terms of your actions on campus or beyond to continue that journey of professional and career development. So again, these are good questions to have. Now, as I mentioned right at the beginning, and some of you have come in before that, but I'm going to sort of use some of my background to describe some of these steps in action, just to sort of illustrate what I'm trying to get at here. I am a first-gen student, undergraduate and graduate. I have a brother who's 3 years older who went to undergrad and got a master's, so I was able to benefit from that. No one else in my immediate family had a PhD. No one else in my extended family had a PhD either. And so I was really sort of adrift in this whole process, and I made choices and all sorts of things that, looking back, I can sort of learn from as well. So I did an undergraduate in biological sciences at King's College London. I did some great research with one of my advisors there, Dr. Sales, who I've circled there, was very supportive. And the reason that I actually went to graduate school is because she said I should. She said, it's a great idea to get a PhD. I didn't really know what that meant. It sounded good. And she said it would be a great opportunity for you to focus on something that you seem to enjoy, which is studying animal behavior. So I did an animal behavior project as an undergraduate. And then the PhD in the UK is 3 years of doing research on an animal. The way that she said I should get a PhD is to look for the best researcher at the best university and reach out to them and see if they have any projects. So I found Dr. Marion Dawkins at Oxford, who's studying chickens, and I was able to make that happen and came on board for one of her projects to study chickens for 3 years. So I was told to get a PhD. Well, I was encouraged to, and I didn't have any other information, so I did that. Some of my own personal motivators, though, well, because someone once told me that people with PhDs often got upgraded seats on airplanes, which has never happened to me, and probably is a terrible reason to have a PhD and a terrible reason to get an upgraded seat because they think you're a medical doctor. But I also like the idea of becoming and thinking about, me as Dr. Joseph Barber. It's like, that sounds cool to be a doctor. And so that's what I wanted. And it was a goal that I actually achieved immediately. I got my PhD. I was able to call myself doctor, and I felt very satisfied. That is not a career choice. That was a personal satisfaction thing, but I feel satisfied that I have that. Even today, I feel satisfied. I feel dissatisfied, obviously, that I never get an upgraded seat. But that's the reality, right? That's the decisions that I made. And they weren't necessarily great decisions, but I'm happy to live with those. For some of the decisions that you have and have made, these hopefully overlap with some of the reasons that you are here at graduate school, right? Sometimes it's because you do have a love of the subject and you want to spend that time. And you nowhere else in your future life are you going to have that dedicated time to enrich yourself in a field, and do that research. So it can be amazing, right? Maybe it's because you want a master's program because you want more opportunities. You want different things that you can do. You want to earn more money and have more satisfaction moving forward. Perfectly good reason there. Maybe it's because you don't want to make a decision, right? You go to graduate school so that you don't have to think about what you want to be when you grow up, because you don't think about yourself growing up. You just think about yourself in the here and now. A perfectly good decision too, because it's a real decision. It's authentic to you. Obviously, at some point, you have to sort of turn that into a decision about what you're going to do next, but it's a perfectly good reason to sort of bring you here. Maybe it's because you actually want to do a job and the degree is for the job. You come here to study architecture and you want to be an architect, right? You sort of need that. And there's a direct line there. Doesn't mean that you have to end up being an architect, obviously. There are other paths open to you, but it's a very commonsensical thing. Understanding and being comfortable with these decisions, I think, is very important to help you sort of feel like you have some agency over what happens next. And the way I would sort of frame it also is, You can't change the decisions that brought you here, right? Good or bad, you are here and you're doing that, but you can change what happens next. And so you have much more control over what you are doing with your graduate degree, or if you are a postdoc, what you can do with that experience moving next into the future. And so a lot of what we're going to be thinking about are those future focused questions moving forward about how to leverage this and how to move beyond, that decision, as I said, which can be a positive, a negative, a neutral decision, and really sort of take advantage of the experiences that you are having moving forward. So then what that brings us to the present day, right? Where we are right now, or where you are right now, the opportunity to reflect on what is going well, what you're excited by, what energizes you. This gives you insight into perhaps what you want to be doing next. If there are some things about your program that are really exciting, those are the things that you can look for in sort of career avenues beyond this that might be exciting for you. So me as a PhD student, what did I enjoy? I enjoyed the creative process of coming up with research questions. I just didn't really like the research, and I really didn't like complex statistics and the Bonferroni correction. I really hated Bonferroni because I had to learn about it and I still didn't understand it. I received every single chicken gift known to man and human and chicken, because I study chickens and there's only a limit to certain chicken gifts that you can have. So I understood that hopefully was a finite period. I can move beyond chickens, although chickens have been very helpful. I enjoyed coming up with funny titles for the papers that I was trying to publish, but the journals did not publish my papers because a funny title by itself is not enough. And I found that was an important learning choice because that's what energized me, was coming up with what I thought were humorous titles for my presentation. It wasn't the research itself, it was how I framed it that way. And then I also learned that there are other ways to write about science that aren't academic papers. And so as part of my PhD experience, I started entering the science writing competitions, and I came up with some runner-up and second places. This was primarily because someone in my lab entered the competition the year before and came in the first place. And I was like, well, if she can do it, I can do it, right? And so, again, I had never seen these competitions before, didn't know anything about them, but I used them as a point to sort of explore. Now, this sort of run of good form, I think, would have been a great foundation for a career in science writing. What I didn't like about that as an opportunity is that the way I saw it was it involved a lot of going out and interviewing people. And as someone with introverted tendencies, I knew I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to have and do outreach to people I didn't know and have conversations with them. It wasn't my strength. And so at least from that point of view, I sort of didn't choose that, or I didn't sort of lean into that more because that wasn't quite what I wanted. But it was a learning experience. From your perspective, then, this is something that you can reflect on, right? As I said, right now, there are things about your graduate program that are really great, and there are things that are probably really sucky. It's the way of the world, right? And so I think figuring out why they're great and why they're sucky is helpful because it gives you a sense of, well, what does that tell me about me? What does it tell me about what I value? What does it tell me about what I want to do moving next, right? And so that reflection is going to be a really important part. And as part of that reflection, your sort of values have changed, right? Again, what's important to you right now isn't necessarily what was important when you started your graduate program and may not be important when you leave your graduate program. But it's important to reflect on that so that you can write it down, because some of the feeling of being sort of confused is because the environment that you're in hasn't changed, but you've changed, your values have changed. And there's sort of a disconnect between, well, but I did want this, but now for some reason I feel like I don't, right? And you sort of have to look inside and say, well, what's changed there? It's also important to think about, especially from a careers perspective, what new skills and experiences have you gained, and make sure that you are keeping a tally of those things and make sure that you are writing those down, because they will evaporate if you just keep them in your head and don't focus on them. So a list of achievements and a list of accomplishments and a list of skills is a really good, healthy, wellness-focused practice, right? You can journal it, you can create just a list, a spreadsheet, no matter what, it's a great thing to do. And there are resources out there that you can leverage to do this as well. So I'm going to sort of talk about some of the resources that we have through Career Services that might be helpful for you. This is the PhD Career Training Platform. There's a video on what do you do, right? And it's talking about the skills that you've gained as part of your PhD. And you can watch this and you can begin to track those down. And they have activities and a sort of a workbook that you can use to keep track of those skills. A really great resource to do. Imagine PhD is another platform that you can use specifically for PhDs in humanities and social sciences. And I'll touch on this a couple of times because it's a really nice user interface to sort of talk about these assessments. But if you sign on to Imagine PhD, they have a skills assessment tool where they have all these skills broken down into research, oral, written, management, leadership, technical, and professional. And you drag and drop the different skills within these categories into the I have never done this, to I can do this well, right? It's a really fun exercise to begin to sort of partition out these skills. You don't have to have a PhD in humanities and social sciences to do this. This is a free tool that you can access. And so I encourage you to do it because I actually found it helpful too. And obviously I have a background in chickens and STEM, so this isn't my genre anyway, but I found the experience to be very helpful. And the idea is that you have to acknowledge what you can actually do well, as opposed to just saying, I don't think I can do this very well. So you always have to put some in the I can do this well category, and that's going to reinforce the fact that you are gaining skills that are really helpful. Beyond Graduate School is our master's student focused platform designed specifically for master's students. And again, they have similar types of programs, in this case, identify your marketable skills, where you can go through and begin to identify what those are and create a sort of a portfolio of skills that you can be able to showcase. Those skills that rise to the top that you have, that you're excited by, those are some of the skills that you want to be looking for in future careers, right? You want to be using those skills. And so your questions when it comes to exploring careers are, who values these skills? What does this look like in different employers when these skills are used? So that's why it's important to sort of have this list of skills that you can leverage. So we've gone from the past, we've gone to the present to sort of reflect, and now sort of the next step is to begin to think about the future and think about what that future might look like in different types of ways. Now, as a final year PhD student, when I was doing my PhD, some of the things that I visualized for the future is that I didn't really want to continue with chickens. I didn't want to be the chicken man forever, even though it was a very helpful part of the brand that I created. I didn't really want to do too much research, again, because great research requires great statistics, and I didn't want to do any of those. I did think animals were going to be a key part of what I was doing. I really enjoyed animals. I enjoyed the concept of animal welfare. So I began to sort of create a list of keywords related to some of the work that I was doing. Environmental enrichment was something I focused on. So that was a keyword that I used in a lot of my job search. And it was actually the reason I got the job after my PhD. Animal welfare nonprofits were an area that I had interacted with because I had research funding from one of those. And so I knew about the University's Federation for Animal Welfare. So I knew some organizations that are out there. I'd done tutoring, not necessarily teaching, but I enjoyed the interactions that I had with students. So teaching was sort of in the back of my mind, but communication and writing were things that I knew I want. So those were keywords that I wanted to. Zoos were an area that I had some knowledge of. I definitely didn't want to work in farms and farm research area because that's it's not great. Creative opportunities were always things that I enjoyed. Obviously, coming up with funny titles for my journals and a poster that looked like the front page of a newspaper for a scientific conference probably wasn't my best idea, but I really enjoyed it. That gave me some sense about what I was there. And then my future I also saw, obviously, with my girlfriend, because that's one of the things that often happens at graduate school is sometimes you connect with people who are going to be there in your life beyond graduate school. So when I thought about sort of the values that I had for the future, the things that were top of mind were working in a nonprofit focused on animal welfare and finding a way to continue to be able to hang out with my girlfriend, who was a US citizen who came over to Oxford to do a PhD in anthropology, right? So some transnational elements there to focus on. So those are some of the things in my mind. From your perspective, in terms of values, that's a really interesting thing to focus on, especially as you're thinking about the future. Because as I said, your values, some of them stay the same, but some of them do change. Sometimes your experience gives you insight that is very helpful as you're thinking about what your next steps might be. This is that Imagine PhD platform again. So it's just a great resource to think about doing this skills assessment. They have an interest assessment, a skills assessment, and this values assessment. Now, I'll show you some of the questions that they ask you as part of this, but you can see my key work values from the answers that I gave. Creativity is at the top. That's important to me. Balance between work and life is an important aspect. That's near the top as well. Recognition for the work that I'm doing. Compensation. Everyone should want compensation. And achievement. And to me, achievement is often personal achievement. It's not sort of significant achievement. I value the things that I can do, and I'm self-reinforcing in that way. But these are some of the questions as part of the value assessment on Imagine PhD. It's important to me that I'm doing work that contributes to making the world better, or gives me the choice in the work hours that I do, the flexibility. And so all of these are sort of 4 scales, and you go through, and it gives you that then summary at the end that sort of highlights some of the main themes that are important to you. Now, again, reflecting on the idea that if you're feeling lost, confused, and stuck, centering some of your exploration around your values is always going to be helpful, right? You're going to do better and have a more positive time if the work that you choose next aligns with some of your values. It doesn't mean it's going to align with all of them or all of the time, but certainly it gives you a sense of the parameters that you want to use to explore career fields that are out there. So these values assessment, I think, are really helpful to add some clarification to what you're thinking about what is a good fit moving forward. Beyond graduate school, the Master Student Platform, they have an Identify Your Values and Motivators workshop and worksheet here that you can go through, right? The same idea about pulling from your experience what's important to you. The motivators are really important because the motivators are what give you the energy that you need to overcome some of the obstacles in front of you, right? So that's why it's so important to reflect on those. The PhD Career Training Platform, again, what motivates you, what energizes you, what do you value in your work? All of these things are really important, and I encourage you to sort of look at those in your own time as well. The other way to explore options is to think about what are some of the well-traveled paths that people with your experience, your background, your degree, your research experience, your skills, what are they doing next, right? And so this is another way of feeling less stuck, because when you find the well-traveled paths, they're usually easier to travel on, right? They've been worn down, the undergrowth has been flattened or whatever it is. So this is why it's important to reflect on that. And for those of you who are coming to the session because you identify as first-generation graduate students or first-generation international students in the US, there can be a challenge in terms of really navigating these well-traveled paths because you don't know that they exist, or you don't know what they are, you don't know where they are. And oftentimes this is referred to as social capital, right? Or postdocs lacking social capital, because you may not have the networks or the connections or the family members who have knowledge of these paths moving forward. And so you don't necessarily know how to connect with these people or what knowledge that they gain from their traveling to use yourself, right? So oftentimes first-generation students need to do much more in terms of connecting and growing their networks to be able to access this information. Otherwise, you're just discovering it on your own for the first time, and that can be really challenging. So building social capital by leveraging communities and networks is a really important aspect. From my experience then, as a first-generation graduate student, PhD student, where I didn't really know what's going on. I didn't know anyone with a STEM research background, so I didn't know what paths that they would have taken. I didn't know what resources the University of Oxford had in terms of career services. I didn't know that I should be using it. No one had told me, and that's a challenge too. I went to one career fair, and people kept looking at me when I went up to tables, and I was put off by that because I didn't have anything to tell them because I didn't know what I was there to do. So anytime someone tried to talk to me, I left, which I think is not my recommendations for how to use career fairs, right? So I'm very cognizant of when we have career fairs of trying to give people the confidence and the ability to sort of navigate that space, because I did not do that well. I didn't even know what the term alumni was. I'd heard it a couple of times, and it really didn't mean anything to me. I probably had to look it up at some point because people kept using it. I was like, I don't know what that is. And I didn't know how to leverage the Oxford network. And at that time, the networks were harder to access. I know how to do that now, right? I can go onto LinkedIn now, and I can go to the University of Oxford page, and I can see that they have 272,000 alumni, and I can do a keyword search for people with an animal welfare background, and I can find the 200 or so people doing that, including some of the people that I used to connect with in my time there, like Christina Cole. And I can find the Oxford alumni in the Philadelphia area, or 494 of them, right? So I have the tools now, and you have those tools too. And they're really great tools because they give you the ability very quickly to grow your own networks by connecting with people. Now, interestingly, my own career path didn't actually take many well-traveled paths. The first role that I got after my PhD was as an environmental research fellow at Disney's Animal Kingdom, right? University of Oxford to Disney's Animal Kingdom. It's quite a big jump. One of the reasons that I was able to do that is because at the time, my girlfriend was doing her PhD research in Orlando, and I was able to leverage that because Disney's Animal Kingdom is in Orlando, right? And so I think that really helped, and it was totally fortuitous and not really in my control. But it was a new role at Disney. No one had had that before. I teach at Hunter College. The course is new there. I had a independent consulting role for the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. That had never happened before. I've done lots of new things. Even my role here at Penn is a new role. The Director of Graduate Career Initiatives is a new role. So I've tended not to take well-traveled paths, but I've tried my hardest to create opportunities that align with my sort of unique experiences and interests and values along the way. And sometimes I've had some control over that, and sometimes I haven't. But you don't always need a well-traveled path. I'm just saying sometimes it's really helpful to see where those people have gone in front of you. Now, from your perspective, there are plenty of data out there on what those well-traveled paths might look like. So we do a survey on all graduating students, undergrad, masters, and PhDs. We don't get 100% response rate on all of those, obviously. We have to do a lot of work trying to get the responses that we do. But all the data that we do have are available to you on our graduate students' first destination page. These are the graduate reports. I can click on, any of these. We'll just do the general one, the combined report from different schools. We can have some master's graduates and PhD graduates by program, and we can take a look at those. You can see general data on where industries that people are going to, dates that they got their offer, locations that they are in, and then you can sort of go through the different programs that are out there. So the Perelman School of Medicine, anyone who's shared data on where they went next, you can see that. You can't see their names, obviously, but you can see the role that they have and the organization that they have. And sometimes if they share salary data, the broad salary. You can even see the internships that they had whilst they were a student to get a sense of what people might have done to get themselves where they are. So these give you some sense of some of the world travel paths out there. People with a cell and molecular biology can work in all sorts of places. A lot of them are, research and development or academic institutions, right? The first destination surveys are wonderful opportunities just to see where people are. If you're an international student, we have US employers hiring international Penn students, right? And this is a more interactive database. So you can click on graduate students here, and then you can narrow it down by employer name or job title or the division, Graduate School of Education, and you can sort of begin to explore what these organizations look like and what people are doing in there, right? So my Penn is the Penn alumni database. We've talked about this in some of the other sessions, so I'll just touch on it in a couple of different ways. But there are 400,000 alumni, over 400,000 alumni in my Penn. And what you can do on my Penn when you log in, you can narrow down by different categories, right? So you can look for people with a graduate degree, and you can look for a program. So I only want people with the Masters of Public Health, 811 graduates here that I can look at. And then I can see the industries and the titles of the roles that they have, right? So it's a very broad perspective of where these people are and what they're doing and what that looks like. But it's all there, right? You can gather some of that information, stick it in your own database, your own Excel spreadsheet, and just say, these are some of the paths that exist out there. Now, obviously, the benefit of this is that you can also find the people who are in these roles, right? Unlike the career plan survey where it's sort of anonymous, you check on these boxes and it will tell you who those people are. And then you can even search for people who said that they're available to provide mentorship, right? They don't want to be mentors, but they're able and happy to share some of their experiences. Those well-traveled paths lead to actual people who can answer some of your questions about that, right? So a wonderful tool, again, to begin to find people. The process of asking questions and asking the right questions is obviously something to focus on before you jump in to some of these conversations. Now, on those two platforms I'm talking about, the Beyond Graduate School for master's student, they have 144 video interviews with master's students who have graduated from different schools who are doing different things, right? So you can see all the career fields at the bottom of this slide where people have gone into, and you can sit in and watch these recorded videos. It's basically networking without having to actually talk to anyone. It's a great way of getting some of this information about those paths and what people had to do to get there. The PhD career training platform has a similar one, right? So rather than job title in this case or industry, they're more broken down by academic discipline and values and interests, right? So you may not know what the job title is that you want, but you know what your interests are. And so you might find that there are opportunities out there that you haven't discovered, but that might, be about empowering others, right? There may be different jobs that do that you've yet to discover. So both of these platforms provide wonderful opportunities to sort of really explore different careers that are out there. Gaps in your knowledge and in your skills are really important to be aware of, because in many cases, during your time at graduate school, you can fill those gaps. You can find skills or knowledge or experience that positions you for a role that you've discovered or uncovered, and now you just need to demonstrate that you have the right skills for that. So after my role at Disney, my girlfriend dated my wife, and then she moved up to New York for a job. And so I left my role at Disney and I became an independent consultant for the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. I was working remotely at home a long time before everyone did that. But as I was finishing up that project or getting into that project and wanted to move on, I began to explore or re-explore the idea of teaching and communication as sort of things I wanted to do. And so I did apply for teaching focused faculty roles. I actually got one offer from Delaware Valley College. I turned it down. The pay was not great. It wasn't the right fit for me in terms of what I was teaching, but I did apply for that. One of the things that happened to me as I was interviewing for these roles, doing the campus interviews, is that I remember being walked around and one of the faculty members talking to me said, this position will have a 3-3 teaching load. And I was like, great. But I had no idea what that meant. I don't know, maybe I hadn't been paying attention during my own experience. Maybe that wasn't talked about in that way in the UK and it was just totally foreign, but I had no idea what it meant. And then, there are other people out there. I found this site on yesterday, where someone was like, I don't know what this is either, right? It's like, you're not taught these things. You sort of have to discover, or they are part of your natural language because you know people who've been professors and they talk about these things. But I didn't have any of that. So it was totally foreign to me. So I agreed to a 3-3 teaching load, and I had no idea what it was. And then after that interview, I came back home and I typed in, searched what is a 3-3 teaching load. It's like, oh. So again, a lack of knowledge. It was lack of knowledge about the field or the language, not necessarily a skills knowledge there. But I didn't have the skills to write a teaching philosophy. I'd never heard of a teaching philosophy. All these things asked for one, and I had to do a lot of research to sort of fill in the gaps around that. Imagine PhD has this, we talked about the skills assessment here. Now, having done the skills assessment and put things into these different buckets, what this tool does next is it compares your skills with common families, job families that people, in this case with PhDs in the humanities and social sciences, go on to do, right? So these are 15 or so job families, advocacy and consulting and things. And it takes your skills assessment and compares it with the same skills that people who work in these roles say that they have. And this is a really interesting way of sort of looking for those gaps in your knowledge area, right? Because skills you can always gain. And so what it does, it's this for writing, publishing, editing in the top left and communications, public relations in the bottom right, where there's a good match between your answer and the expert's answer. You get a nice star here. When there's a lack of a match, you get an even pointier star. I can't see how many points there are on this star. But what it's saying here is that if you are going into communications and public relations and marketing, probably design skills are important because experts say they have these and you say that you don't, or I say that I didn't. It's not saying I can't go into communications, public relations, and marketing. It's saying that if you want to be successful, you probably need to fill this skills gap, right? Find an opportunity in your program to gain this skill, gain it on your own, look on LinkedIn Learning or whatever it is you need to do to gain that skill. But it's a really great way, again, of positioning yourself for a role and seeing what might be options for you. You don't have to have all the skills that are written in a job description, but the more that you do have, obviously, the better positioned you're going to be. For those outside of the humanities and social sciences, you can do this on the MyIDP tool or the ChemIDP tool for chemistry. They follow a very similar process where you can go through a skills assessment. Again, they sort of do 1 to 5 scales on different skills. This is just a sample of the skills that they ask about. And then they map those against different knowledge. So this is science writing, and it's saying the experts are in blue here. This is what they say, and you are in green. So I don't actually have a broad-based knowledge of science. I have a focused area on zoology and chickens and things. And so that's probably why I have a 2 here and not a sort of an expansive one. Doesn't mean that I can't gain that knowledge. It just means that I should be aware of it. And I'll feel more confident about moving forward if I fill those gaps. The IDP tool does this nice matching of skills and jobs, and it sort of gives you a ranking, but it's not saying that I can't do things at the bottom. It's just saying, again, if I did nothing, I'd be better positioned for what's at the top right now. But it's also saying that the things at the top are most likely to bring me joy when I do them, because I'll be able to use the skills that I have or the skills that I have naturally. If any of you took the Strengths Quest assessment, those are the things that you want to look for in careers, because those are things that you can easily use when you are doing work. So your skills and the skills needed in the job are a good thing to compare. And I feel like sometimes that's going to help you feel less stuck in the career exploration that you're doing, because it gives you something actionable to focus on in terms of how to build skills that move you closer to a role that you're excited by. So I took just a couple of job types, marketing and user experience, UX roles, and I took a job from LinkedIn. And what I did is basically looked at the skills in that job, what they were looking for, the responsibilities, and sort of broke down some of the keywords that jumped out to me, right? So the things on the right in the yellow are the things that they are looking for in a resume, in an interview, in a candidate. And if I have those, that's great. And if I don't, maybe I can build them. And if I don't know what they mean, like a drip template, I have no idea what that is. Obviously, that's an actionable item that I need to find it out, because I should not apply for a job if I don't know what it means, right? Because they'll ask, what experience do you have with drip templates? They'll be like, I don't know what that is. And that's not going to be a good look. So the other one, the UX researcher, right? So I did the same thing. I had the job description. I pulled out some of the things that seemed to jump out as skills that were needed. Some of them make sense. You should have focus groups. Some of them are more complex. Fuel ideation. What does that even mean, right? So I don't know what that means because I've never been in this role, but someone who's in this role might have a sense of what that represents. What does that represent in your work when you fuel ideation? You would ask them in a sort of a network conversation. And then terms like working cross-functionally, right? It's not a word that we use in academic world very often. It's a very common word in industry, but you should not apply for a role if you don't know what the words mean. You should look them up, understand them, check in with alumni who might be able to give you some perspective. And what you learn from the definition of those terms, you might be able to use as you're positioning yourself in your resume or cover letter or your interviewing. So you can take all this data, you can take all those skills from different jobs, and you can basically create yourself a table that you say, I have these or I don't have those. And the ones that you don't have, you can say, well, can I get them? Do I want to get them? If I really don't want them, then maybe it's not a good fit in terms of a role. But if I'm happy to get them, then that's going to be great. So again, this is just an example of what it could look like, but it gives you actionable content to make you comfortable moving forward. The question about what does it actually mean to work as a UX researcher or in marketing, what does fueling ideation mean? The people who have those answers are the people in those roles. And so we're going to certainly talk about LinkedIn as a way of doing that. And what I can do here in the LinkedIn search bars, I can search for University of Pennsylvania. I can go to the alumni tab here, and that takes me to that page, right? 194,000 alumni broken down by where they work, mostly at Google, where they live, what role that they play, what they're skilled at, and what they studied, right? And so what they study can be an easy way sometimes to narrow the field down. So, I'm a chemistry person, I have a chemistry background. What are people with a chemistry background doing? And I can see the types of work that they're doing, or the organizations. I can see the roles that they play, or skills that they have, right? And so I can certainly look down and find a whole range of people. These are all Penn alumni. These are all 4,000 or so Penn alumni who are out there. Now, a good way of narrowing this down even further, obviously, is to look for people that you're connected with in some way, right? Your first-degree connections that you've actively connected with. More likely, your secondary connections are going to help you build that network and community. These are people that you don't know, but you are connected to someone who does know them, right? So it's easier, 800 or so people. Iris is a secondary connection. I know Tomas works at PCI. I know 5 other people who are connected with Iris. If I really wanted to reach out to Iris, I could use any one of those people in my network to do that, right? But first of all, I'd have to figure out what it is that I want to know about her experience that would help me answer the questions, right? How easy was it to leverage this 3 months summer associate to get the job that she has, right? Was it essential? Was that important? Was it difficult to get an internship as a graduate student at Penn? What were some of the challenges that they faced, right? So many questions that can be answered by sort of slice and dicing through that alumni network. I've covered this in other presentations, so again, I'm not really going to go into too much detail there, but hopefully that gives you a sense of what that looks like. Again, both on our 2 platforms, the PhD Career Training Platform, How to Grow and Build Your Network is one of their presentations with different chapters, different strategies. Beyond Graduate School, Building Connections for Career Success, all out there for you to be able to access. Leveraging LinkedIn and MyPen is another video. So those 2 tools together, LinkedIn doesn't like to give you emails, MyPen does. People don't update MyPen, but they update LinkedIn, right? So those 2 platforms interchange very nicely to make sure that you can gain access to people who have answers to the questions that you have. And what you're doing when you're reaching out is basically what we call informational interviewing, right? You're sort of leveraging the experience that people have to learn from that. And especially if you identify as first gen, that's really important because you don't have a lot of people to lean into right now in your own immediate networks who have answers to those questions. So you have to build out those networks to be able to leverage those best practices. And some of the questions that you really want to answer that are going to be helpful to sort of move you forward are, what are the skills that are most valuable in this role? What are the challenges that you face in this role? Answers to those questions will give you a sense about whether your skills, your interests, and your values are going to be sort of echoed by that. What are some of the skills you'd still like to gain, right? Because you can ask that question and you can gain those skills in your time at Penn. And part of gaining those skills is finding opportunities to gain some experience, right? To dip your toes in the water of a particular career field to sort of take advantage of that. And that looks like a range of different things, right? So we have this sort of career engagement continuum, different ways of engaging with careers. Chatting with people, what we've just been talking about, is still experience. It's still gaining experience. It's not you doing, it's you talking, but you can gain experience from that. You can leverage that knowledge as you are applying, as you are thinking about your resume, right? So it is still experiential in its form. The more conversations you have, the better. We do have access to a couple of platforms or resources that are job simulations, right? There's one specifically designed around PhD students called the Intersect Job Simulations. Again, everyone can access this. And what they do is they've created sort of mini exercises that fall in different types of career fields that you can go through on your own and just say, do I enjoy this? Does this seem to utilize the skills that I have and that I like, right? So market analysis project or clinical trial schedule organizing or research a commercial product, right? These are different tasks that often occur in these different sections, journal editing, making a decision or whatever that is, right? So each of these is an experience that you can do in your own time that gives you a perspective that may help you feel like this is a good fit and I can move forward exploring this career path, or this seems really boring and I should be cautious about moving forward in this career path. Again, lots of things to explore on your own. The other platform that we have is called Forage. These are perhaps more structured experiences that are sort of coordinated by different employers, right? And this is a free site that you can log on to And when you're on the site, you'll see that there'll be different career interests and different exercises. This is just some of the new ones that they have. And each of those is an opportunity to give you insight into part of a job or part of an industry or part of an organization's role to see if that engages with you, right? So focusing on ESG with Tata Consulting here, it's a 4 to 5 hour program, right, that you do on your own time. Exploring engineering as part of GE Aerospace, again, 2 to 3 hours to complete this and gain some skills. Life sciences research, another 4 to 6.5, very specific hour sort of engagement, right? Things you're doing in your own time. The great thing about this and the great thing about Forage is that it also tells you what to do with this once you've done it, right? How do you talk about this in your resume? How do you talk about this in an interview or on LinkedIn, right? And even especially for the resume, it says, this is how we recommend you listing it, right? Don't put it under work experience, they say. Now, if you have a relevant experience section, you might be able to frame it under relevant experience because you're not saying it's work, you're not saying it's paid, you're just saying it's relevant. You just have to make sure it's framed correctly. But their sort of suggestion here is a perfectly good suggestion for making sure that these actions have value as you're going forward. So all of these things have value, right? In different ways, in different shapes. They can all add value to the way that you are positioning yourself. And each of these will give you insight that will make you, again, more confident about making your next decision, right? If you have an opportunity to engage in an experience, you will get a sense of whether it was positive or negative, and that can help, as a data point, decide if you're heading in the right direction from a career exploration perspective. Then we have the putting into action, and certainly this is not what we're going to focus on a lot of today, because this is once you've taken this experience and once you've learned about yourself and your skills, and you've learned about the skills that are valued, you're going to want to make sure that it sort of comes to life. What I try to do when I apply for jobs is be very strategic. So when I was applying for the Disney role, I did say I could come to Orlando because I could travel over there and see my girlfriend. But I also said that I'd be happy to do a presentation. They didn't ask for a presentation in the job advert, but I said I'd be happy to come over and talk about my research because I wanted to be open and I wanted to demonstrate that communication skills was something that I was happy to use. And I did want to communicate with them, right? So, and they took me up on it and they asked me to do a presentation. For my independent consulting role, I helped craft the nature of that role. I helped create it by working with people that I networked with as part of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. And my supervisor actually was very helpful at making that come to life too. When I applied for my first position at Penn, I spent a lot of time on their website, which is now our website, looking at the suggestions that they were giving students, because obviously I wanted to make sure that when I was applying for that role, I was using the advice that they were giving because they were going to judge me on that advice, right? And they were going to judge my materials on how they recommend other people creating those materials. So that was me sort of putting it into action and being strategic about that. And certainly, if you have a one-on-one appointment with us here at Career Services, we can sort of talk through strategies that you might have to leverage those experiences. There's so many resources on our website on how to improve your resume, how to do cover letters, how to interview effectively, right? So these are the nuts and bolts of applying for roles that when you are feeling more confident and less stuck and less confused and less lost, you can really lean into some of these job search strategies. Most importantly, are the celebrations, right? Celebrating your success. And the reason that I think this is really important is because in academia, you oftentimes get a lot of critical feedback. Well, it's not necessarily negative, but it's critical feedback. That's, that's seen as being helpful, which in many cases can be, but you don't get a lot of positive feedback. You don't get people telling you that you've done a great job. You don't get people celebrating the skills that you've gained or the knowledge that you've gained. And so you have to bring some of that, right? You have to be self-motivating and self-reinforcing for the steps that you are taking. And those things, those celebrations, you can find your own way to celebrate, but the things that you should be celebrating on the new knowledge that you're gaining, or the new connections that you're making, a new skill that you put into action, a new experience that you've had, turning everything off and not doing anything as a celebration, right? Focusing on your wellness. So important that you are prioritizing your wellness, because as you're putting yourself out there and networking and interviewing, your energy wants to be one that's coming from a positive place, right? So making sure that you celebrate that too. So all of these small things are celebrations. If you come to Career Services, we'll tell you that you're doing a great job. We'll celebrate that with you, and make sure that you feel like you are making progress. We're happy to be a celebratory sounding board for you as you're doing your work moving forward. But don't forget this. This is so important to make sure you celebrate, but also documenting, right? So going back to something that we said earlier, document those successes and the skills so that you can see the progress that you're making in real time. I was on LinkedIn. I just saw a couple of posts where people were thanking people, and that was sort of a helpful way that people were both celebrating, but also lifting up other people who've been part of that process. That's a really great thing to do as well. It makes you feel good to celebrate your own successes and to lift people up as you're going through that. Being active on LinkedIn is a really great thing to do as well, because it helps people see that you are interested and engaged about the different types of career fields that are out there. And then finally, we've talked about a lot about the resources thus far, and I sort of mentioned the support, but career services can be a support for you. And, and I hope you do leverage us as a sort of a sounding board, as a way to sort of keep you on track and have appointments. Obviously, we serve a large population, so it's hard to have a continual week by week, meeting out there. But where you can find appointments, please do take advantage of that and, talk through where you are. And if you are feeling lost or confused and stuck, a great place to verbalize those things in a safe space is with us here at Career Services. The Learn How To part of our website talks about all these things that I've been talking about. So great resources there. And then my final recommendation is find a buddy, right? Find someone in your peer group, a group itself, a whole community of people who are going through this process. They don't have to be in your field, they don't have to be in your discipline, but if they share a common goal of feeling lost or wanting to focus on something, that's great to happen. Your accountability buddy helps you with networking, helps you be strategic and efficient with the limited time that you have for professional and career development. And so it's a great resource to have if you can find that.